you get that?
Yeah, I'll do that when you're on.
There you go. Good afternoon, Southern Institutions. It's Thursday, January 12th, and we're continuing our discussions about what we could expect to see in the Capitol bill. And today we're going to meet with Teresa Corazon, State Court Administrator for the Vermont Judiciary, and Greg Mosley, Chief of Finance and Administration for Vermont Judiciary. So, Teresa.
Thank you.
Very nice to meet you. Thank you for coming.
Nice to meet you, Senator. Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And I feel unprepared because from what I understand, there is no budget item yet but I'm more than happy to give a little overview about the courthouses in Vermont. And then Greg certainly can answer very detailed questions that I may not be able to, but he's been involved up to his neck during the pandemic era with all the HVAC work and other work involving the courthouses.
Oh, nice, because we're actually meeting, we're meeting this afternoon after you guys with Joe Asia, and we're talking about HVAC. So yeah, so that would be very, very helpful.
Okay,
So, yeah, so.
Well, just basically in general, we have 24 locations, the judiciary around the state. The larger counties tend to have 2 courthouses, usually an older one that started out with a county courthouse, and then the second one, if they have one, a state courthouse.
Yeah.
Originally, all the counties in Vermont had the county courthouse, and all types of cases were having that county courthouse. And then ultimately the state gradually took over different aspects of court operations. In the 60s, there was a criminal district court that was added. In the 80s, family. In the 90s, environmental. And different courthouses were constructed. We don't own any of them. In the county courthouse, we're a tenant of the county. The state courthouses are operated by BGS.
Which one's the Superior Court? Is that state or county?
You know what? Good question. In 2010, there was an historic restructuring of the judiciary, and they unified the states and the county, the county courthouses and the state courthouses into one unified superior court.
Okay.
So there's one superior court throughout all of Vermont, and there are 14 units that basically correspond to the 14 counties. And then each unit has 4 divisions: civil, criminal, family, and probate. And the county courthouses normally house civil and probate, and the state courthouse is criminal and family. For the smaller counties that just have the one courthouse, all 4 divisions are there.
Yeah.
So that's the Vermont unified, the superior court system. And we're not normally all that involved with the buildings, if you will, but during the pandemic, the judiciary became very involved, mainly because of the HVAC issues and all the health restrictions that prevented us from basically operating at full capacity, because of the isolation distances and the air ventilation issues. So Greg, thankfully, who is finance, stepped in and really oversaw all the improvements that were made to primarily the county courthouses, some of which had no ventilation systems. Some state, we did receive $5.7 million to upgrade the county courthouses so that they would have adequate ventilation. And those projects are kind of in the final stages. A number of them have been completed. There are 2 courthouses that have some work remaining that are in the punch list phase of that.
So you said 27 courthouses?
24.
24. Now,
locations.
are all of those getting upgrades, the HVAC upgrades?
The only 2 that I think are still in the punch list stage, there are 2 from what I understand in the county.
Yeah, Grand Island and Franklin County are nearly complete. They're just finalizing a few last things. The other 12 county buildings are all getting some type of upgrade that's in process and should be done in the next weeks or months.
So they all of them needed work?
All the county buildings needed work.
Sure.
Yeah, the state buildings were handled by BGS.
Yeah, okay, yep.
And some of them were fine, I guess.
Many of them were fine. 2 of our courthouses that are state-owned needed extra work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And the other work involving the courts were all the pivot to remote hearings. Before the pandemic, we might have had a phone on the bench, to connect with somebody. Now, every courtroom in the state is equipped for remote hearings with the large screens, with the laptops, with the wiring that was done, so that we can connect.
We had the court that was the judge was with it was very, very interesting to see how it worked, and I was amazed to see how many people, the lawyer come with a public defender, and the person didn't show up, and they went, the judge wasted that time, go on another one, and you just don't know how it works until you sit there, and it was very interesting to to find out how the whole process works.
Did your case come out okay?
Yeah. They let me out. They.
Okay, good, good, good.
Some conditions.
Yes,
Good, good, no, well, that was wise.
I remember.
And our courthouse, we actually had a court with an interpreter as well as the Zoom, I mean,
Oh,
it was
really?
just
Oh,
so many
Wow.
things to juggle at once. I was amazed to see it come off.
yeah.
Well, it's been an incredible tool, the remote hearings, and
Yeah.
you looking at a silver lining to the pandemic, because of the pandemic monies basically enabled us to research, implement, and then train on all that equipment, but now it's really a very helpful tool, it just affords a lot more
The
flexibility.
judge doesn't have to travel all these places. They can do it right there in a couple cases. And it's all done within an hour. The judge can move on to somebody else, you know, just, and it's very clear what the case is. There's nobody gets denied anything. The lawyers, the judge, the state's attorney, they all have their input. It was very, very good.
It's helpful to litigants as well, they
Yeah.
don't have to travel the
That's
same
right,
way,
that's
take
right.
time off
No,
of
that's-
work. The only, I guess, questions are for those who aren't maybe able to connect, if they don't have the internet
that's true, yeah.
access. But hopefully I know that there's strides being made there as well to increase the coverage, but,
Can they request that they don't participate because they don't have coverage? Can they,
yes,
or they can postpone it to a live time or something?
right. Ultimately, the judge has discretion
Oh,
whether
okay.
to schedule a hearing remotely, in person, or even hybrid. Or some are in person, some participating
Oh,
remotely.
okay.
But in any event, any litigant can ask for an alternative.
Oh,
If it's
okay.
remote, they can ask to be in person and vice versa. They have that option.
Yes, fine.
It's interesting, in our orientation, I'm a new member, and Senator Renner is also new. We had an orientation when the Supreme Court justices came. It was really interesting. And one of them brought up remote access, because there are places where folks don't have it. And there was some sort of proposal, I don't remember what it was, it was like a van to go.
Oh, well, that was the chief talking about the travel.
Up there. It was a really interesting idea, because there are folks, in your area especially, I think, where they can't get to court.
Right, another alternative is to basically install kiosks or facilities, whether it's at a library or a town clerk's office, or somewhere where there isn't a courthouse, so that people can use that to be able to connect. But you're right, trying to figure out how to get increased access to justice, basically. And, but this has been a great tool, you know,
Oh, yeah.
to have that just as another option. So that's how our courthouses have been impacted by the pandemic, with those kinds of changes that have gone on for the past. Now, today, all the courthouses are open fully for in-person. You've probably heard about the backlog, but that was really exacerbated by our inability to schedule cases or to have full courtrooms or to have the jury files that we, need to have in order to move those cases. But now we're fully open and the HVAC has been improved, so we're on a good path, certainly. In terms of the capital bill, there is a project that we've been working closely, meeting with BGS. It involves the Washington Criminal and Family Courthouse in Berry.
Yeah.
That's the one project that's at the top of the list, mainly because of security considerations. I don't know if any of you have had occasion to be in Berry at the Criminal and Family Courthouse. But a big problem is there's no holding cells or security or sally port. Normally, when you're bringing somebody who's incarcerated or transporting them, there's a whole separate part of the building, like in Rutland, it's a whole different level.
Right.
In fact, you can bring them in, so there's security and confidentiality. But in Berry, literally, they pull up and they go walk past the judge's chamber to get to the courtroom, and there isn't like the ability to. It's kind of a security nightmare, I guess. So that's number one on the list to do renovations. BGS is conducting a feasibility study to look at either a completely new building or renovation of an existing building to primarily address the security concerns, because there's no security in place there. And you have persons in the hallway without any kind of separation.
I think we visited Montclair one time. that part of, did some
Yeah.
changes there at one time down here.
Right.
When they are touring.
Right, the one in Montpelier would be civil and probate. So you normally wouldn't have people transported for criminal hearings or trials or arraignments. But the one in Berry, and there's also apparently the mechanical, mechanics there are outdated. And I think the other aspect of it is the size, they're basically short one courtroom. They really need, for the level of cases, criminal cases in particular, a second courtroom. So those are the main reasons why that is at the top of the priority list for construction projects involving the judiciary. Because Greg again has more information that the feasibility study is almost complete, and BGS really is kind of has, they would have the best information on that now that we anticipate that'll be something that we'll be presenting as soon as they make their conclusions about the best approach.
I'm just looking quickly through, just for the committee, looking quickly through last year's capital bill, just for the BGS, it's like about $2.7 million that we appropriated for courthouse, whether it's new roofs or just, I know in Newport, we've probably probably $1.5 million where they want to put a new courthouse in. So they've been investigating about where they're going to do that, buy some land and all of that stuff. So I'm sure this is just BGS. So I'm sure we have more advice to take more and be disrespectful to you looking down at this. So
No.
there's more money that are probably being appropriated out of this bill. So I expect that the new bill will have even as much, if not more.
I would anticipate also, there's a number of other projects I know that are needed, but I just thought in terms of the priority, that is the top priority, and BGS agrees that would needs attention.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing to think it was built without those aspects. I don't understand.
It was built, I believe in the 70s, and energy efficiency was their top goal. And so it is awkwardly placed on the lot. The windows are not well placed. All the staff are in a place where there's no natural light. They're interior to the building. And so it was just, and all the mechanicals now are getting to end of life. So BGS is interested in upgrading or replacing them. And we're interested in upgrading the security aspects and adding a courtroom. And so last cycle, they said, we proposed two different proposals, one that was focused on mechanicals from BGS, and ours was focused on security. And they said, come back next year and put it together. That's what we're expecting to see.
A lot of the pandemic brought a lot of those issues to the forefront, and we can address them now, because I know they were neglected for years. And now at least we're making progress. Didn't go up in Morrisville, they put a courthouse up there, or what it was.
Memorial, there was a complete renovation.
I had that one, yeah.
Well, the pandemic has, caused a lot of problems, but again, hearing the modernization of become modern and be able to do court in a way that, other places have probably done it for some time, and it actually put a timestamp on it that it would be done by this amount of time. So, and the best part about it was, I suppose we're all paying for it one way or the other, but it came from federal dollars. So to get to that point that fast and to modernize the way that we do justice is pretty amazing.
It really was a silver lining. So we're grateful for that, certainly.
Yeah.
But I guess the security aspect of the Berry courthouse is, if you ask for capital construction, that would be
The Natural Lake staff,
well, that would really
while they're
be
at
a
it.
nice bonus.
Wow.
I guess the building's very energy efficient, but we learned with HVAC too that, everything was, let's have it as airtight as possible. Now we learned that, no, that's not good. That's a detriment to health. So airflow is better.
What else?
For capital construction,
If you want to go through details of the county buildings for your particular counties or what's happening generally, I could do that.
Sure.
If you wanted to get that specific.
I have just one question too. During the court day in Rutland, the chief mentioned a figure, I'm not gonna get it exactly right, that in the Budget Adjustment Act, we'd be looking to add, I think it was 6.8 or $7 million. But that wasn't anything to do with what you're talking about, correct?
I think that might be to separate from ADS, or to have better computer network capabilities
Yes.
possibly.
Yes.
Yeah, and that has actually, since then, even become more of a serious issue, because we've had our courts shut down more than once, because the judges couldn't access their files, the litigants couldn't access the courts, with ADS being overly, I guess, saturated. But we're doing our best now to finally deal with the backlog, and that's happened. So I think that might have been because
I
it's.
think you're right, Jerry.
Yeah, that's that price tag, but we found, I mean, it's been a debacle. Full courthouses, and then nobody can do anything
Yeah.
because the network is saturated, and all we're told is, well, we have to wait, there's too much here, wait a couple hours. It's like, we can't wait a couple hours. There's people here now for their cases, so,
We found out rather quickly what good paper is.
yes.
Supreme Court doesn't do anything remotely, right?
Not, no, they're back in person, they were remote during the pandemic.
Oh, they were remote.
Yes, they can go to their hearings remotely, and like you, they can be live streamed, you can access them to watch them if you wish.
So you must have had some, a lot of this, or maybe you didn't, but I imagine some of the rural places probably had to do a lot of upgrades as far as to get their internet service in there and stuff like that to be able to handle. I mean, imagine before they had probably just barely enough, but then you start throwing in teleconferencing in there, which takes a pretty good bandwidth. So there had to be quite a bit of work in that way.
You're exactly right, Senator, and I think 7 million was the amount that actually allocated for the WebEx remote hearing technologies, and some courts needed more upgrading than other courts. It's interesting, Costello Courthouse, which you think of as being modern, but because of the way they're configured and the thickness of the walls, they had some of the least effective wiring of any courthouse. So it varied from court to court. Greg would know exactly, because he kind of oversaw.
Yeah, in Costello, the challenge was they had Cat3 wiring, which is about 25-year-old technology. So we're trying to upgrade that to Cat6 now. In terms of bandwidth, Orleans was the challenge there, where they still had copper wires going out of the building. And so,
Well, we got last week. Oh, yeah, last week. Yeah.
You're gonna love
Yeah. Well, they said, but I think the whales like it more, because I don't use the whale oil anymore. Yeah.
So anyway, the cable, copper wire was just replaced just last year by BGS. So that improved the bandwidth to that criminal courthouse there. We did have 2 state courthouses, one in Wyndham Windsor, and the other one in New Orleans, that had HVAC that was determined to be insufficient for pandemic use. And so that was an interesting place where we stepped out of our tenant role, and we kind of managed a project to beef up the HVAC in this room. It basically was installing another unit and a little bit of ductwork to ventilate courtrooms a little bit better. And we worked very close with BGS. They, of course, controlled the building, but they trusted the people that we were hiring, many of which had BGS experience. And so we used some pandemic money to beef up the HVAC in Windsor and also in Orleans. The issue in Orleans was that the HVAC only went to courtroom and not all the ancillary parts of the building. And so we had to expand that a little bit.
Yeah, I know we were involved a little bit in that, trying to determine if whether we could get the courthouse open. And it was more of, there was areas like the jury room and stuff like that. We were actually talking about bringing a trailer in and making it to the building so that people could go and that, be safe in that way.
We also priced out a swing space entirely of,
Yeah.
new space
That's right.
that BGS would fit up for a courtroom during the pandemic. It was too pricey to do. So, we worked very closely with BGS in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
In Essex, we're in a county-owned building. We've taken on the project of upgrading the HVAC, as I mentioned, in all 12 county buildings. And in Essex, it needed a new one because a number of those courthouses, Grand Isle, Essex, they didn't have any HVAC.
Really?
The Wyndham building in Newfane had no HVAC. So, that's all being fixed, and there's some ancillary benefits that go along with ventilation. Not only are you pandemic proof now, but for instance, all the attic insulation has been replaced with spray foam. You know, a lot of the carpentry has been beefed up to support the weight of equipment. So we've done you know, all sorts of painting and you know, things like that that have beefed up the courtrooms in different ways. And so I think, you know, these 12 courthouses that are owned by the counties are going to be in good shape once this work is all done.
And you got rid of that infestation too.
Yeah, Essex and Grand Isle, I think both had bat infestation, so we have a good bat removal guy.
Yeah.
It was done humanely, so
Yeah.
no bats were killed.
Yeah, yeah, they were just encouraged to go elsewhere.
Yeah.
What's the oldest county courthouse, you know? Rutland seems like maybe 40s, 50s.
Oh, no, Rutland County Courthouse was like 1890,
Oh, wow.
I think, yeah. Because the original one was on Main Street that burned, and we still had some of the files at Rutland County Courthouse. You could see the smoke marks from the
Oh, no kidding.
fire on Main Street.
Wow.
Yeah, that was, so that era, I know it isn't the oldest. From looking at them, I would almost wonder if the Essex one might, or maybe,
I honestly don't know
that's a good question.
the
I should-
oldest. I know Orleans, I think, was 1896
Oh, okay.
or 1906,
Oh.
somewhere in that range.
I will try to find out, because I would like to know.
Yeah. So we tried there was open the window.
Yeah.
Right. It could, sometimes works better.
And you have some new courthouses?
The newest one
Counties.
would be the Memorial, the renovations.
The renovation in Memorial, that's an interesting one where the state put an addition on the county building. So depending where you stand in the building, you're either in county-owned space or state-owned space. So that's a hybrid. Addison and Caledonia do not have county courthouses. They have a single courthouse. I think Bennington was the most recent brand-new build.
Before the war.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was 12 years ago,
Oh.
15. That's a while ago, but it's still the newer one.
Yeah, and the Rutland one, now the McCaffrey Courthouse, that was more the 90s, I'm gonna say.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
So, you
Hopefully
know,
we'll get one in Orleans.
Orleans is probably the one in the worst shape, I'm gonna say.
I
structurally.
would say that that's pretty, yeah, that's got to be the two to combine, because they're right next to each other. They're separated by an alleyway. And so we actually have two courthouses, but they operate programmatically as a single courthouse. One manager, one records room, the judge and the staff, they keep walking back and forth. So
Where is it, what towns?
in Newport.
Newport City.
Yeah, and that's one that has a feasibility study going now to try and design a new courthouse, brand new courthouse, and find a space for it. So there is
Well, we do have a spot right in the center of town, but
Right.
but we, you know, it's kind of hard to give up. We already have another state building taking up some pretty expensive lakefront area. So it's pretty hard to give up some of your best taxable land space to, you know, on something that is gonna be a tax base, so.
Good for the public.
Oh,
In addition, Orleans Courthouse needs the elevator,
Yeah.
because it is so old, it's in disrepair, it seems.
So there are a lot of issues. So, you know, in Rutland, that county building is actually going to be a complex HVAC fix. The work hasn't really begun there. We're still in the design phase because the basement is actually a finished courtroom. There's a family courtroom in it. So there are very thick walls on the first floor, 1.5 feet thick. And in the basement, there are brick walls and there's drywall everywhere. And so I think the design means taking the drywall ceiling down in the basement and putting in some ductwork into the spaces between the rafters and then drywalling that back up. So it's going to be a complex fix there. So they're going to start, it's either February or March, and they should be done by summertime.
so these HVAC systems that are going in, it's funny that I never thought of this question before, but these HVAC systems that are going in, are they handling air and heat, or are they just cleaning air?
Their
Or
primary purpose is to clean air. They do have heating elements, but they're not designed as primary heating sources. So they'll avoid pumping in the the 10-degree cold air as it pumps it into your courthouse, it'll heat it up to something that's more manageable so that your heat source can keep it warm. So they do have heating coils, they do have air conditioning coils, so they'll be air conditioned.
Yeah.
But they do rely on some other heat source. And so some of them, they're moving towards heat pumps.
Right, yeah, that's a big thing, heat pumps, everybody's installing heat pumps outside here. Warm it up or cool it down, it's amazing what they're doing with that.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of designs of HVAC systems and they're horribly complex.
Oh, my God, I guess
They can
so.
take in cold air and warm it up, and they
Yeah,
can take
yeah.
in, hot, humid air and dry it out, and cool it down. And they also have a way of getting rid of the condensation.
Yeah.
And so it's very complex. But all these HVAC systems will be kind of state of the art, right? So not just the county buildings that have new ones going in, but all the other county buildings that have had HVAC. Many of them serve portions of the courthouse and not all of them, primarily courtroom. A lot of them put something in the attic. They ventilated the courtroom itself, but then left the first floor just unventilated. So, these buildings will be in much better shape. A lot of places have had their electricity upgraded to support the equipment. So there's a lot going on there with this pandemic. So that's great.
On the older buildings, do you need to comply with historic preservation?
Yep.
And is that the state that you deal with?
Yes.
So you don't have to have a different agency in each county?
No, we do have to hire an architect. So we have a mechanical engineer on contract. We also have an epidemiologist that we've been using for COVID protocols. We have 3 different facility project managers on contract. And we have an architect who historic preservation requires an architectural drawing of the design or the plan. So we have to hire the architect to get the plan to HP, historic preservation. And of course, then we deal with the fire marshal and all the other things. So it's terribly complex for an organization that's really designed to be a tenant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So a lot, all this expertise is on contract and funded through the pandemic.
Did you get a decrease in your rent after you've upgraded the building?
So good for everybody to know that in the county buildings, we pay no rent.
Okay.
The counties are required to provide a space for the judiciary free of rent. And usually all the ancillary pieces of postage meters and computer equipment and utility costs, that's usually handled by the county, but they all kind of merged in different ways. And so there's kind of unique arrangements out there.
For the state buildings, I don't think there was any impact on the rent other than it going up.
So in the state buildings, we do pay rent, fee for space. It's just part of that. It's based on square footage. And we have had some interesting experience with that as agencies have either grown or mostly shrank because of the pandemic. The cost per square foot has gone up. So what they do is they take the whole cost of the building and they divide it by square feet, and they just charge all the tenants. Well, if one of the tenants has moved out and said, we're going to go remote, well, the cost for the other tenants have gone up.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So that's what we're dealing with, and I would imagine that's what's happening with other agencies.
Because in some of the courthouses, in the state courthouses, there are other tenants. It might be the state's attorney's office or DCF or other agencies.
Probation, parole.
So
Yeah.
that can vary as well. So
We have, I think, 6 buildings that are shared with executive branch tenants. We have a few buildings that are state-owned, but 100% courts. And then we have the 12 county buildings. And we have 1 lease here in Montpelier for our business office. It's not a court.
across the street from the pavilion.
How many would you say bodies represent judiciary in the state of Vermont?
I think permanent positions are 340 or so, is that? When you say bodies, you mean
People, it's just-
Yeah. 300.
I would say that's about the right number for permanent positions. For employees,
that's not counting the sheriffs and all that.
the sheriffs are not our employees.
Right.
Contracted. We do have a fair number of limited service staff, pandemic related. That pushes it more towards 400.
Yeah.
Amazing.
We have 23 courthouses in the state.
24 locations, 23 of them are courthouses. 12 of them are counties. The 2 counties without the county building, as I mentioned, is Addison and Caledonia. And this is the only county, Washington County is the only one that has 3 buildings because of the Supreme Court.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's, there's a project involving that too, but that's something not for this year. But
I'm not sure what will be for this year, but they're looking at the old library. So what some people call the stacks, those big metal
Yeah.
bookcases, and trying to figure out how to make that more usable space.
Yeah.
It's not usable with all those bookcases in there. So they want to take the bookcases out, but those are 2-story bookcases. And so they're actually structurally part of the building. And so they have to do that very thoughtfully and carefully.
they're unique.
Do you have any space that you're actually, that the federals, the feds are in there occupying court space with you, or? No,
Those are
but-
completely separate. Normally, those are the 2 federal courthouses, or 33 actually. None of them is one too.
Here and then.
They typically the federal post office building, where the federal courts are.
You're doing that share space.
Well, good. Committee, anything else to ask or anything else you, yeah?
So the 2 senators and I went on the tour in this building of the HVAC system, and it was pretty interesting. There were rooms I never knew there were rooms. We went underneath the building and on top of the building. Part of the problem here, according to what Joe was saying, was the supply chain. They had ordered new HVAC equipment, but and wanted to get it all done, I think he said last summer, and they couldn't get them. And I was amazed how big the equipment is. I mean, they're fairly good sized pieces. So anyway, they're gonna order them again and again until they get here, and I guess they're gonna do it this summer. Are you facing the same issues? Yeah.
We had the same issue with ordering certain parts and equipment, and we also had an issue hiring carpenters.
Everybody.
Oh,
yeah.
Carpenters,
Electricians,
yeah.
you can't find them.
our unique problem was carpenters, but yeah, all those tradesmen, there's not enough of them to go around. Everybody wants to upgrade their HVAC, so all those parts and all that expertise is months out. That's why our project is going slower than we thought. We were targeting January this month to be completely done with all 12 buildings, and we're still in the thick of it.
I was surprised to hear you were as far along as what you were. I really was, because that's all that's all you hear. So,
We've run into a lot of interesting issues. Like in Essex, when we spray foamed the attic, it separated you have a wood ceiling there,
Right.
It separated the wood or moved it, and dust went everywhere.
Oh,
So we had to shut down the court and get some people in there, clean it up.
Yeah.
And so you run into bats for, that kind of stuff. And in Grand Isle, of course, those interior walls that are 2 feet thick of granite or whatever that is, marble.
now I heard that Grand Isle Courthouse is actually older than Mazda. Is that true?
Comment.
I didn't know.
I got to visit. We opened it.
Oh, God.
A lot of our equipment is smaller than what you would put into this space. So you saw it probably big. We have smaller units that somebody can put on their shoulder.
Oh, yeah, no, these are good for
Really?
So, Franklin Civil has this weird staircase where, you only have a certain amount of room where you can get. In Grand Isle, you go up a ladder and you have to go through a 2x2 cutout to get to the attic. And so the equipment is much smaller. And what happens in courthouses, we tend to have like 4 or 5 different units. There might be one for the courtroom and the chambers, and then there's 2 more for the first floor. And they might be in the basement. So to try and cut down on the work, we generally put the equipment in the attic to serve the second floor, and in the basement to serve the first floor. And that way you're not sending ductwork through the courthouse, except in places like Grand Isle, where you can't go through the walls and floors.
Yeah, of course, they were built a long time ago. They didn't have the expertise for building like they would today. Today, it would be so efficient today, but back then, it was like when they built the house, and the walls were that thick. And, yeah, it wasn't energy efficient at all.
What else? Well, Greg, I just want to commend you for having knowledge of, all that process. I mean, you're a money guy. I mean, there you go, and you understand it, and that's very helpful to, for any process, that the person that, that understands that process.
I am chief of finance and administration. And so
Yeah.
the administration part is HR and security and
Yeah.
facilities. And I tell people pre-pandemic, the facilities part of my job is about 5%. And it's really contracts,
Yeah.
contract management. And it's become about half my job.
Yeah.
And it's really just a ton of work.
Yeah.
You ever hear from my friend Judge Weirson after he retired? Is he?
Yes, actually, he's helping us with expungements.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It is a
Good.
retired judge to process so that the on the bench judges, can do their regular work,
I
so.
still talk to him, I call him once in a while, said he wants a job at the store, but
We talked to him just as he's getting ready to retire up there in Newport, and everybody was angry and all this and all that, and he just got on, and we just had a great conversation, and he explained everything what was going on, and I was very glad to, had met him before he retired. What a good guy.
Oh, he's great.
Yeah.
He knows everything in and out. He was a private practitioner, but he was on the bench for many years and in the district. He really loved his work with the legislature. I think he worked
Oh,
there
he had a
too
good,
longer
good
than expected because he
relationship. Yeah.
really enjoyed the interaction. with you all.
So he does come back once in a while, do some work?
Yes,
Oh, good.
yeah, he's, it's the expansion work.
I
but
can't think of anybody better to be doing that type of work. It's good.
Actually, he knows everything in and out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll tell him that you.
Yeah, tell
Yeah,
him.
please do, we did, well, like first, the only time I met him, but he was good.
We'll give him more money if he comes down and says.
We will definitely tell him.
Well, we're good if you guys are, and
Thank
we
you.
just want to thank you for coming in, and very great overview, and really, really appreciate it very much, and congratulations for being so far along with very complicated and trying times. I appreciate what you do.
Well, thank you all very much, and please don't hesitate if you have other questions that come up, or when they do the feasibility study and they have a project, we're happy to answer questions and whatever would be
We
helpful.
live in Rutland. you got-
I live in Mendon, so just next door to
Okay.
Rockland.
Yeah.
That way. Is that your area too?
Yes.
One of my favorite towns.
I'm
That's my favorite.
Hopefully.
I'm selling a house not too far from that. I'm on Powerhouse Road. And I've got a client,
Oh,
Powerhouse Road and
yeah, no,
Chittenden.
Powerhouse,
Yeah,
right, because
yeah.
our Chittenden and Mendon share Barstow School on, to get to Barstow.
Yeah,
Powerhouse.
yeah.
Oh, that's a lovely area.
Yeah, it is. Very nice. Well, sounds good.
Great.
Appreciate you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
hope you all are enjoying.
Oh, yeah.
This experience.
Ah,
Must be so
I
interesting.
think
It
so.
is.
I'll have to, Maybe we have Joe Beasley, who didn't have a chance, so he can't be here till 2:30, so let's take a break until then. And maybe